It started with a whisper that grew into a storm. A single sentence, dropped casually in a conversation, that would soon ignite one of the most shocking scandals to ever link Prince Harry back to his past. She was paid to spy on Meghan. At first, no one knew who he was referring to. The press speculated. Social media boiled with theories. But it didn't take long for people to connect the dots, to realize he was talking about Chelsy Davy, the woman who once held his heart long before Meghan ever entered the picture. Think about it. The woman who stood beside him during his wildest years. The woman who endured the press, the palace, and the chaos of royal life. Now being accused of betrayal? The same Chelsy Davy who once said she'd never sell her story, never leak a word about their relationship? And yet, here she was, years later, being painted as a paid spy? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That's where this story begins. A love that turned to silence. A silence that turned into suspicion. And now, suspicion turned into war. Because Chelsy didn't just sit quietly this time. She decided to fight back. She lawyered up. She gathered her evidence. And she prepared to drag the Duke of Sussex into a courtroom where royal titles mean nothing and truth is all that matters. But what could have pushed her this far? Why now, after years of staying out of the headlines, would Chelsy Davy choose to strike back against Prince Harry himself? The answer lies in a chain of events that began not with malice, but with fear. Meghan's fear. In Montecito, whispers say Meghan had grown increasingly paranoid. Every leak, every rumor, every line in the tabloids that seemed too accurate, too personal, she blamed someone from Harry's past. And Chelsy, with her history, her beauty, and her calm silence, was the perfect target. Imagine being accused of something you didn't do. Imagine opening your phone one morning to see your name trending, linked to the words betrayal, spy, and Meghan Markle. That's exactly what Chelsy woke up to. At first, she laughed it off. Not me, she told friends. I haven't spoken to him in years. But then the phone call started. Reporters asking for comment. Emails flooding her PR office. A few clients hesitating to work with her. The whispers became poison. Because in the world of reputation, perception is everything. And Harry's careless comment, those 6 words, began to destroy what Chelsy had spent a decade building. A quiet, respected life outside the royal circus. But before we get to the lawsuit, before the court filings and media explosions, we need to go back to understand the roots of this storm. To remember who Chelsy was to Harry and why this accusation cuts so deep. Because there wasn't just a romance. It was the story of a prince and the woman who saw him before the palace walls went up. Back then, long before Meghan, before California and Netflix deals and memoirs, Harry was wild. The rebel royal. And Chelsy Davy, brilliant, independent, and untamed, was his equal in every way. They met in 2004 at a polo event in South Africa. She wasn't dazzled by titles. She was blunt, funny, and unafraid to tell him no. That's what hooked him. They traveled, partied, fought, made up, broke up, and always came back to each other. The press adored her at first, the blonde law student who had captured the prince's heart. But soon, the headlines turned cruel. Chelsy can't handle royal pressure. Party girl not fit for a palace. Every photo was analyzed, every expression dissected. And that's when she made the decision that would change both their lives. She walked away. I can't do this, she reportedly told Harry. I love you, but I can't live like this. And with that, she left the royal bubble behind, moved back to Africa, and built her own empire, quietly, successfully, and far from the cameras. For years, she refused every interview request, never cashed in, never wrote a tell-all. While others would have milked fame, she disappeared into normalcy. But here's the irony, that silence, the very thing that once protected her, became the weapon used against her. Because when Meghan entered the picture, everything changed. Harry's new life was built on the idea of being wronged, misunderstood, betrayed by the system. Every narrative had a villain. And when the tabloids wouldn't stop, someone had to take the blame. So when leaks started appearing about royal tensions, private details, even small domestic moments, Meghan's paranoia reportedly grew. Someone was talking. Someone close to Harry knew too much. And according to one insider, Meghan once asked bluntly, "Is it one of your exes?" At first, Harry denied it. But as pressure mounted, the paranoia seeped into his words. And one day, during a conversation meant to defend his wife, he went too far. She was paid to spy on Meghan. 6 words. That's all it took. No name mentioned. No direct accusation. But everyone knew who he meant. Within hours, social media lit up with references to Chelsy. Old photos resurfaced. Threads dissected her timeline. A new conspiracy began. Was Chelsy Davy the mole in the palace? And just like that, a decade of silence was shattered. Chelsy, who had stayed loyal by saying nothing, was now being painted as the ultimate traitor. And the saddest part? She found out through the internet. Imagine sitting at breakfast, opening your phone, and seeing headlines like, Prince Harry hints his ex betrayed Meghan. It wasn't just an insult. It was a scarlet letter. At first, she tried to ignore it. She told herself the truth didn't need defending. But then, her business started feeling it. Investors hesitated. Event invitations slowed. Friends started calling to check in. That's when she realized something. Silence was no longer protection. It was permission. And that's when she made her decision. Enough was enough. Chelsy reached out to a London-based law firm specializing in defamation. They listened. They analyzed. They investigated. And they found something that stunned even them. Because it wasn't just one careless comment. Behind the scenes, members of Harry and Meghan's circle had allegedly been feeding the narrative to online outlets and podcasts, repeating this spy rumor to sympathetic journalists, building a whisper campaign that would slowly destroy Chelsy's reputation without ever naming her outright. It was strategic, it was damaging, and it was cruel. The lawyers advised her, "You have a case." She hesitated, not because she doubted her truth, but because she knew what this meant. To sue a royal isn't just a lawsuit. It's a declaration of war. But Chelsy had been silent long enough. And when she finally filed her legal notice, she didn't do it for money. She did it to reclaim her name. The news broke on a gray morning in London. Chelsy Davy sues Prince Harry for defamation. The internet exploded. Some called her brave. Others accused her of revenge. But those who knew her best understood, this wasn't revenge. This was survival. And as word reached Montecito, sources say Harry was blindsided. Meghan was furious. Because this time, the past they tried to bury was about to rise, and it wasn't on their terms. And that's where the Real story begins. Because what came next would not only shake the foundations of Harry's marriage, but expose just how far the Sussexes were willing to go to protect their image. And it all started with the woman who once promised she'd never speak again. But she's speaking now, and the truth she's about to reveal might just destroy everything Harry built. It began, as these things so often do, not with a royal decree or a press release, but with a whisper. A quiet, almost careless remark that would ripple across continents and ignite a scandal capable of tearing open years of buried tension. One line, said too casually, on the wrong platform, to the wrong audience. And before dawn had broken over London, that whisper had turned into an inferno. She was paid to spy on Meghan. No names, no details, just that. But in today's world, where gossip moves faster than truth, everyone instantly knew who she was. Chelsy Davy, the one woman whose name still lingered in Harry's shadow long after their romance ended. The woman who had once been described as the love of his life by royal insiders. The woman who chose a normal life over the crown. Now, suddenly, she was being cast as a traitor, a pawn, a paid informant. And the irony? She didn't even know it yet. The accusation surfaced during what was supposed to be a confessional interview. Harry, seated before a sympathetic host, was speaking about betrayal, about how he and Meghan had been watched, followed, and lied about. His tone was tense, his voice brittle with emotion. He talked about people from his past who couldn't be trusted, people who had been manipulated by the press. Then he paused, looked directly at the camera, and said it. Some even took money to spy on Meghan. For a split second, the interviewer's expression changed, a flicker of shock, the kind of reaction that tells the audience something real had just slipped through. Harry moved on quickly, but the damage was done. Because viewers caught it, journalists caught it, and within hours, the internet caught fire. Who was he talking about? Reddit threads, TikTok theories, gossip accounts, they all pointed in the same direction. Photos of Chelsy and Harry from their younger years flooded timelines. Captions read, "Is this who Harry was talking about?" By morning, The Daily Mail ran it as a headline. Royal sources speculate Duke's spy comment linked to former flame Chelsy Davy. And with that, the fuse was lit. Imagine being Chelsy. You wake up, check your phone, and see your name plastered across headlines accusing you of espionage. You're not a celebrity anymore. You're not a royal girlfriend. You're a businesswoman, a mother, someone who spent years staying quiet, by choice. And suddenly, the man you once loved is painting you as a villain. She must have stared at her screen in disbelief. It didn't make sense. At first, she thought it was a mistake. A misinterpretation. Surely he hadn't meant her. But as the hours passed, as podcasts picked up the quote and influencers debated her name, it became impossible to ignore. Chelsy had become the story again, and not in a way she could survive quietly. This wasn't just gossip. It was character assassination. And while Harry's team remained silent, Meghan's circle didn't. Anonymous friends began giving statements to outlets, saying Meghan had long suspected someone from Harry's past of feeding personal details to journalists. They didn't name Chelsy, but their descriptions were unmistakable. A former girlfriend who had access to intimate details and a link to British media circles. Every word was a dagger. Within 48 hours, Chelsy's office began receiving calls from reporters. Some polite, some ruthless. Would you like to comment on the spy allegations? Do you deny being paid by media contacts to leak on Meghan? She said nothing. Her friends, however, spoke quietly to one another. She's livid, one said. She's heartbroken. And then came the turning point, the moment silence turned into action. An article appeared in an online tabloid claiming that a former girlfriend of Prince Harry once met with a reporter in London for an undisclosed payment. No name. But the timing, the photos, the insinuations, it was clear. They were talking about her. Chelsy realized something. If she didn't fight back now, her silence would be her guilt. She reached out to her attorney. Not a high-profile celebrity lawyer, a discreet, seasoned professional known for handling quiet but devastating cases. And the first question she asked wasn't, "Can we win?" It was, "Can we stop this?" Because this wasn't about money. This was about reclaiming dignity. The attorney asked for everything. Emails, calls, texts. He started digging. And what he found stunned even him. Because behind Harry's public remark was a calculated effort to reinforce it, through whispers, leaks, and anonymous sources that all seemed to trace back to Montecito. Harry might have spoken in passing, but someone else had made sure the world understood exactly who he was implying. The lawyer drafted a letter, simple, devastatingly clear, warning the Sussex legal team of an impending defamation claim. It was sent privately, without media attention, as a professional courtesy. But inside Montecito, the reaction was anything but calm. Sources later described the scene. Meghan furious, pacing the living room, demanding to know why Harry had said it. Harry defensive, insisting he'd never mentioned her name. Their PR team scrambling to do damage control, suggesting a quiet clarification might help. But Meghan reportedly refused. "If we apologize, it looks like we lied," she said. And so, silence again, the same silence that had already cost Chelsy her peace. Meanwhile, in London, Chelsy's lawyer waited. No response came. Not a statement. Not a denial. Nothing. That's when he said, "Then we file." The official court notice was lodged just days later. Prince Harry, accused of defamation. For royal watchers, it was unprecedented. For Harry, it was humiliating. For Chelsy, it was liberation. Because after years of staying out of the spotlight, she finally spoke, through her legal filing. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't angry. It was factual, meticulous, and sharp as a blade. In it, she detailed how her name had been improperly connected to false and damaging allegations, implying criminal behavior. She described the professional harm, the emotional toll, and the reckless nature of Harry's statement. The media devoured it. For the first time, the narrative shifted. Headlines now read, "Chelsy Davy strikes back." Public sympathy swung in her favor. After all, she was the one who'd never sold her story, never traded privacy for fame. And now, the man she once loved had forced her to defend herself against a lie she didn't deserve. But for Harry, this was more than a PR disaster. It was personal history resurfacing. He'd built his image around being misunderstood, wronged by the press, loyal to Meghan at all costs. And now, one careless line had turned his past into ammunition for his critics. And worse, It gave the palace something to talk about. Behind closed doors, royal aides reportedly muttered, "We warned him this would happen." Because in the royal world, words aren't just words. They're weapons. And Harry, in his attempt to protect Meghan, had just fired one at the wrong person. Yet, as damaging as the claim already was, no one, not even Chelsy, could have predicted what would come next. Because soon, her lawyers would uncover something far more dangerous than gossip, something that pointed directly to Meghan herself. And when that truth came out, the story would explode far beyond defamation. It would become a reckoning. But before that, Chelsy's old memories began to resurface. Memories of the love that started it all and how it ended. Because to understand why this case hurts so deeply, you have to go back to when Prince Harry wasn't a duke, a victim, or a tabloid target. He was just a man in love with a woman who refused to play by royal rules. Before Meghan, before Montecito, before the documentaries, lawsuits, and ghost-written memoirs, there was Chelsy, the first woman who truly captured Harry's heart. The woman who saw him not as a prince, but as a man. And the world, at one time, couldn't get enough of them. Their story began in 2004, far from the polished world of Buckingham Palace. The setting? South Africa, wild, sun-drenched, and raw. Harry was still finding himself, barely out of the army, restless and rebellious. And Chelsy Davy? She was everything he wasn't supposed to fall for. Blonde, fiery, fiercely independent, and completely unimpressed by royal titles. She was studying law at the University of Cape Town, the daughter of a Zimbabwean safari businessman. She didn't play coy. She didn't bow. She challenged him. And that's exactly why he couldn't resist her. They met through mutual friends at a polo match, surrounded by dust, laughter, and champagne. But what sparked between them wasn't the typical royal fairy tale. There were no tiaras, no gowns, no palace dinners. Just two young people drawn to each other's freedom, his from duty, hers from tradition. From that day on, they became inseparable. Harry flew to Cape Town at every opportunity. They were seen dancing barefoot on beaches, sneaking into local pubs, and disappearing into the bush for days at a time. To the world, it looked spontaneous, romantic, thrilling. To the palace, it looked dangerous. Because Chelsy wasn't like the others. She didn't seek approval. She didn't care about public image or polished behavior. And that made her unpredictable, something the royals feared most. In private, Harry was captivated. She laughed at his bad jokes. She saw through his moods. She understood the restless, wounded boy behind the uniform and the title. She told him when he was being arrogant and when he was being kind. She gave him something no royal advisor ever could: honesty. But honesty, in the royal world, is a double-edged sword. When the tabloids got wind of their romance, they pounced. Chelsy Davy, party girl princess? Can a Zimbabwe heiress handle royal duty? Too wild for the crown? Headlines dissected her every move, her clothes, her accent, her nightlife. One night, photos of her laughing with friends at a club surfaced online. The tabloids ran it with captions implying she was out of control. The palace was furious. Harry, caught between love and loyalty, was torn. It was the beginning of the end, though neither of them knew it yet. They broke up for the first time in 2007. But like all great love stories, it wasn't that simple. They kept finding their way back to each other. Every time Harry appeared at an official event, journalists whispered, "Will Chelsy be there?" Every time she showed up at a polo match, cameras flashed like lightning. They were young, in love, and trapped. But what made their relationship so unique was how real it was. Chelsy never pretended to fit the mold. She didn't want the palace life, the fake smiles, the endless etiquette, the press intrusion. "I could never handle that," she reportedly told a friend. "It's not freedom. It's a cage." And yet, for all her independence, she loved him deeply. Enough to endure the chaos for longer than anyone expected. Enough to stay even when every headline called her unfit. But the pressure was relentless. The paparazzi followed her everywhere. Cameras outside her apartment. Photographers waiting at airports. Journalists calling her relatives for quotes. Every step she took became a headline. And eventually, the weight of it all became too much. In 2011, on the eve of Prince William and Kate Middleton's wedding, Chelsy and Harry's relationship ended, for good. She attended the wedding as his date, stunning in a turquoise dress and matching hat. The cameras caught her smile, but those who knew her said it didn't reach her eyes. That night, after the reception, they had the talk. They both knew it was over. She couldn't live in his world, and he couldn't leave it. Chelsy was the one who got away, a royal insider once said. He adored her, but she wanted normal life. Harry wanted love inside the palace. She wanted love outside it. After that, Chelsy disappeared from public life. She went back to Africa, then to London. She finished her law studies, built her jewelry brand, Aya, and focused on business. Her interviews stopped. Her social media went private. She became what few exes of royals ever managed to be, untouchable. But here's where the story takes its ironic turn. While Chelsy had let go, the public never did. Even years later, when Harry began dating Meghan Markle, old photos of him and Chelsy resurfaced. She was the one that got away, people tweeted. He looked happier then. The comparisons were brutal, and Meghan reportedly hated it. To Meghan, Chelsy represented something deeper, a ghost from Harry's past that wouldn't stay buried. She wasn't just an ex. She was a reminder of who Harry used to be before the palace drama, before the lawsuits, before the world turned him into a cause. And that ghost haunted their relationship more than anyone realized. According to whispers from royal insiders, Meghan once confronted Harry after seeing online comments comparing her to Chelsy. "Why does everyone talk about her like she's perfect?" she allegedly said. "If she was so perfect, why didn't he marry her?" Harry reportedly tried to calm her down, but the seed was planted. From that point on, Chelsy's name was like a curse in their household, the unspoken reminder of a life Harry once lived and Meghan could never control. Fast forward to years later, when the spy comment exploded. That's when it all came full circle. Because when Harry accused someone from his past of betraying Meghan, it wasn't just a careless comment. It was emotional residue, resentment, projection, guilt, and defensiveness all tangled together. It was, in many ways, Meghan's paranoia voiced through Harry's lips. And Chelsy? She was the unintended victim of that paranoia. The woman who had chosen silence over fame. The woman who had never spoken ill of him, now being accused of betrayal. It's poetic in a tragic way, isn't it? The first woman who protected Harry's privacy, now fighting for her own. The girl who refused royal life, now forced back into it through scandal. But Chelsy wasn't just fighting back with anger. She was fighting with evidence. Because while the world thought she'd been living quietly, she'd been documenting everything. Emails, photos, conversations, proof that she'd had no contact with the media, no link to Meghan, no reason to spy. Her silence had been misinterpreted for years. Now, it would become her shield. But here's where the story takes its next turn, because Chelsy wasn't the only one with old memories. Behind palace doors, Princess and reportedly told King Charles, "He's brought this upon himself. He should have left the past in peace." And yet, Harry couldn't. Because as the case gained traction, old wounds reopened, both emotional and royal. You see, Chelsy had kept something from their relationship. Something private, sentimental, but damning. A diary. Not a secret tell-all. Not a revenge memoir. Just a young woman's journal, filled with entries about her time with Harry. The nights they laughed. The moments they cried. The fights about privacy. The warnings she gave him. And according to those close to her, that diary was about to play a major role in her legal strategy. Not to humiliate him, but to prove that she'd been honest from the beginning. Because in her own handwriting, years before Meghan ever arrived, she'd written one prophetic line. "I love him, but I can't trust the world he's part of. It always needs an enemy." Now, more than a decade later, that sentence would echo through the courtroom. And when it did, even Harry wouldn't be able to escape its meaning. Because this wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. It was about truth, the kind of truth that outlives fame, titles, and palaces. And as that truth began to unfold, one person in particular grew restless, Meghan Markle. Because if Chelsy's diary saw the light of day, it wouldn't just expose Harry. It might expose Meghan's greatest fear, that her husband's heart had never fully let go of the woman who walked away. But what Chelsy was about to reveal next wasn't just emotional. It was explosive, because deep inside her evidence file was something that connected directly to Meghan herself. And it would flip the case on its head. And that's where the next chapter begins. It's often said that the past doesn't stay buried. It lingers, whispering in the background of every new beginning. For Meghan Markle, that whisper had a name. Chelsy Davy. To most of the world, Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry began like a fairy tale. The charming actress meets the world's most eligible bachelor. A modern romance blossoms, progressive, glamorous, and drenched in symbolism. But beneath the headlines and photo ops, Meghan's story wasn't one of comfort. It was one of control. Because from the very start, she wasn't just marrying Harry. She was inheriting his ghosts. And among those ghosts, none haunted her quite like Chelsy. You see, for Meghan, image was everything. She came from Hollywood, a world where reputation was a currency more valuable than money. Every glance, every gesture, every outfit carried a message. And when she entered the royal family, a system obsessed with perception, she understood immediately that control meant survival. But Harry's past was something she could never control. From the moment their relationship became public, Meghan faced a barrage of comparisons. Chelsy never complained about the press. Chelsy looked natural with the family. Chelsy handled the attention better. These weren't just harmless comments. They were emotional daggers. And each one chipped away at her confidence. According to insiders, Meghan became fixated on knowing everything about Harry's exes, especially Chelsy. She'd ask Harry probing questions at odd hours. What did she say about you? Did she ever talk to the press? Do you still think about her? At first, Harry brushed it off. It was years ago, he'd say. She's married now. She's moved on. But the reassurance didn't help. In Meghan's world, the past wasn't dead, it was competition. And that competition terrified her. In Montecito, whispers say she once banned Harry from mentioning Chelsy's name entirely. She didn't want reminders. She didn't want memories. But the cruel thing about memories is that they appear even when you forbid them. Harry still had old photographs, buried deep in storage. A few letters, small things from another lifetime. When Meghan discovered them, she reportedly demanded they be destroyed. We're not living in the past, she said. We're building a new story. But for someone like Meghan, the past wasn't just a memory, it was a threat. Because Chelsy represented everything Meghan could never be. Effortless, grounded, unbothered by fame. The press adored how Chelsy had walked away from royal life without bitterness. She'd become a symbol of independence, the one woman who said no to the crown. And Meghan, who had sacrificed her Hollywood identity to become a duchess, couldn't comprehend that kind of freedom. In Meghan's mind, Chelsy wasn't just an ex, she was an archetype. The good woman, the media always compared her to. The quiet ex who stayed dignified while Meghan was branded manipulative, ambitious, and controlling. So, when whispers began spreading through the tabloids again, leaks about Harry and Meghan's private disputes, inside information about Frogmore, and anonymous sources from Harry's circle, Meghan's mind went to one place. Chelsy. It sounds paranoid, doesn't it? But paranoia is a powerful thing, especially when you live under constant scrutiny. Every leak became a betrayal. Every rumor, a potential enemy. And Harry's old life became a minefield of suspicion. According to one source close to the Sussexes, Meghan once told a friend, "I know it's someone who used to know him. Someone who doesn't want to see us happy." That's how it started, the slow, steady erosion of trust. Inside their mansion, conversations turned into interrogations. Harry's phone habits changed. His messages were monitored. His friendships with anyone connected to his past grew strained. Slowly, Meghan began isolating him, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear that someone, somewhere, was still watching. And that fear grew teeth. When Chelsy attended a charity gala in London in 2020, one that also happened to include a few old royal acquaintances, Meghan reportedly lost it. She demanded to know why Harry hadn't told her Chelsy would be there, even though Harry himself hadn't attended. Why does she still go to these events? Meghan allegedly asked. She's not royal anymore. She's doing it to stay relevant. Harry tried to calm her, but the argument spiraled. Those close to them described that period as one of constant tension, a marriage under siege by old ghosts and new insecurities. But then, something happened that would feed Meghan's paranoia beyond control. In 2021, a gossip columnist published a detailed account of Meghan's strained relationship with one of her staffers, including quotes allegedly from private conversations. The article mentioned details that only someone close to Harry could know. The journalist refused to name sources, but the internet went wild with speculation. Reddit threads, blogs, Even Twitter accounts began suggesting Chelsy was still talking to people in the royal loop. It was all baseless, but Meghan believed it. She reportedly confronted Harry again. It's her. It's always been her. Harry denied it, but deep down, the seeds of doubt had already taken root. And then came the infamous podcast interview, the one where Harry made that fateful comment. She was paid to spy on Meghan. The world took it as a throwaway remark, but for Meghan, it was catharsis, validation of her fear. In her mind, Harry had finally spoken the truth she'd always known, that someone from his past, was still trying to destroy them. But what she didn't realize was that those 6 words would do something far more destructive. They would drag Chelsy, the woman who'd spent a decade avoiding the spotlight, back into the center of a royal storm she never asked for. And in doing so, they would expose everything Meghan feared most. Because Chelsy wasn't silent anymore. She'd had enough. Enough of being the ghost in someone else's story. Enough of being accused of betrayal when all she'd ever done was walk away. Her lawyers were already drafting the legal documents. Her statement was being prepared. Her evidence collected. And while Meghan believed she'd silenced a threat, she'd actually unleashed one. Because Chelsy's lawsuit wouldn't just challenge Harry's words, it would pull open the curtains on everything behind them. The manipulation, the paranoia, the obsession, and it would reveal a version of Meghan and Harry that no Netflix camera had ever dared to show. But before the world saw that, something else was about to surface, something from deep within Chelsy's private archives. Something that would prove Meghan's paranoia wasn't the only thing driving this chaos. Because as the court documents were being finalized, an anonymous envelope arrived at Chelsy's lawyer's office, containing information that pointed not to a betrayal by Chelsy, but to a betrayal within Harry and Meghan's own team. The spy wasn't an ex. It was someone much closer. And that revelation would set off a chain of events no one, not even Meghan, could stop. But how that information reached Chelsy, that's where the next chapter begins. It started as a murmur, a careless remark here, a vague quote there. Then suddenly, it was everywhere. Headlines screaming betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. The kind of story that ignites overnight and burns for weeks. But this time, the fire wasn't lit by the media. It was lit by a prince. She was paid to spy on Meghan. 6 words. That's all it took. By the next morning, those words had wrapped themselves around every major publication, dissected by royal reporters, discussed on podcasts, analyzed on television panels. Some treated it as a tragic confession, others as a veiled attack. But everyone agreed on one thing. Prince Harry had just opened a Pandora's box he couldn't close. At first, there was confusion. Who was she? The interview didn't name anyone. But the royal gossip circuit doesn't need names. It needs connections. And within hours, the pieces were being connected in real time. Chelsy Davy's name trended worldwide. The once private businesswoman, who had successfully built a career far from the limelight, suddenly found herself accused, without proof, without warning, of being a paid informant. It was brutal. Online trolls flooded her social media. Journalists camped outside her boutique. Reporters called her company pretending to be potential clients just to get a comment. And the cruelest irony? Chelsy had spent years refusing interviews precisely to avoid this kind of chaos. Friends tried to shield her, but the internet never sleeps. Within 24 hours, thousands of posts appeared connecting her to the spy comment. Some were speculative. Others were vicious. A few even claimed to have sources confirming she'd been seen meeting with tabloid journalists years earlier. All lies. But lies travel faster than truth, and Meghan, watching the storm from Montecito, didn't stop it. According to a palace insider, Meghan was satisfied that Harry's comment had finally shifted blame away from their inner circle. For months, the Sussexes had been dealing with embarrassing leaks. From household staff, charity teams, even friends who'd turned to the press. The spy narrative worked perfectly. It created a villain. And in Meghan's mind, that villain had a familiar face. She believed it. Completely. When Harry's team realized how the public had interpreted his comment, they panicked. Advisors urged them to release a clarification, something vague, something diplomatic, anything to stop the chaos. But Meghan reportedly refused. "We don't owe anyone an explanation," she said. "If people assume, that's on them." That decision sealed their fate. Because silence, in moments like these, is an admission. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Chelsy was living through her own private hell. Her name was being dragged through digital mud, and her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, family, even old acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Is it true? She didn't answer. Not at first. Because how do you respond to a lie that's already taken on a life of its own? But when her business began to feel the impact, cancellations, lost deals, whispers in boardrooms, she knew she couldn't stay quiet anymore. Still, she didn't rush to the press. That's never been her style. She went to her lawyer. A letter was drafted, short and devastatingly precise. It demanded a retraction and public apology from Prince Harry for implying she had been paid to spy. It gave 7 days for a response. 7 days passed. Nothing. Not a statement. Not a denial. Not even a clarification. Just silence from Montecito. And that silence spoke louder than any words. Because behind closed doors, Harry's team was divided. Some wanted damage control, a public clarification, even an apology. Others, especially those close to Meghan, believed admitting fault would make them look weak. So they waited. They hoped it would fade. But it didn't fade. It grew. Because now, journalists began digging. They looked into Chelsy's past. Her work, her friendships, her connections. And in the process, they uncovered something else entirely. An anonymous source had been feeding select online blogs with tips about Harry's exes, long before the interview ever aired. And those tips included specific wording eerily similar to Harry's comment. She was paid to spy on Meghan. Word for word. The discovery sent shockwaves through the legal community. It suggested coordination, not a slip of the tongue, but a planned whisper campaign. Chelsy's lawyers expanded the case. What started as a defamation complaint now bordered on a conspiracy to damage reputation. And that's when things started to unravel inside the Sussex camp. Reports say Meghan's staff began deleting emails, clearing chat histories, changing passwords. Damage control turned into panic control. Harry, meanwhile, was reportedly distraught, not because of the lawsuit, but because of how it made him look. The man who had fought against tabloid cruelty was now accused of spreading it himself. But Chelsy wasn't looking for revenge. She wanted truth. When her legal team filed the case, they included a note in their statement. Our client has maintained her silence for years out of respect. However, silence cannot defend against defamation. That line became headline gold. Suddenly, the public conversation shifted. Sympathy poured in for Chelsy. Even royal watchers who once called her the one who got away now called her the one standing up for herself. And as pressure mounted, insiders claimed Harry reached out privately, trying to clarify things, insisting his words were taken out of context. But Chelsy refused to speak directly with him. Everything, from that point forward, would go through her lawyer. Because this wasn't about romance anymore. It was about accountability. But behind every great scandal lies a secret, and this one was about to explode. Because just as Chelsy's lawyers prepared their evidence, they received an anonymous delivery. Inside the envelope were screenshots, emails, and internal notes, all from a source within Meghan and Harry's media circle. And what those documents revealed was explosive, a timeline showing how the spy rumor had been seeded to sympathetic journalists weeks before the interview aired. Which meant one thing: the accusation wasn't a spontaneous mistake. It had been part of a plan designed to shift blame, to create a distraction, to silence suspicion. The truth was uglier than anyone expected. The spy didn't exist, but the smear campaign did. And now, Chelsy had proof. The legal landscape shifted overnight. Her team prepared to present evidence that could not only clear her name, but expose the Sussexes' entire media strategy. And when Harry found out about that evidence, the anonymous leak, the internal emails, he reportedly went pale. Who sent that? He asked one aide. Who would betray us like that? The irony was thick. The man who accused others of betrayal was now the one being betrayed from within. And Meghan's paranoia? It wasn't easing, it was intensifying. Because if someone in their camp was leaking real evidence now, what else might come next? Their kingdom of control was crumbling. And the next revelation would shatter it completely, because buried in those emails was a midnight message from Meghan herself. A message that could change the entire case. And that's where the next chapter begins. There's a moment in every royal scandal when whispers turn into war. When words that were once tossed casually across microphones and podcasts transform into legal ammunition. For Chelsy Davy, that moment came on a Tuesday morning in a London law office under the low hum of fluorescent lights. The papers were ready. The signatures were inked. The case, Davy v. the Duke of Sussex, was official. And for the first time in history, Prince Harry was being sued by the woman who had once been his closest confidant. The legal system doesn't care about titles. It doesn't bow to crowns or curtsies. Inside a courtroom, a prince is just another man who must answer for his words. And that reality hit like a thunderclap. For Chelsy, this wasn't vengeance. It was vindication. She hadn't spoken in years. She'd refused interviews, dodged reporters, stayed out of royal gossip. But now, she was being forced into a spotlight she never asked for, and the only way out was through it. Her legal team had prepared meticulously. They had dates, transcripts, digital logs, and the infamous interview clip that started it all. The defamation suit was sharp, clear, and brutal in its precision. It accused Prince Harry of making reckless and damaging public statements that had caused measurable harm to Ms. Davy's personal and professional reputation. Those words, reckless and damaging, hit hard. They weren't emotional. They were surgical. In London, news of the filing broke like an earthquake. Media outlets scrambled for details. Was it true? Had Harry really been served? Would Chelsy actually testify? The palace declined comment, of course. Montecito's PR team, on the other hand, went into chaos mode. Phones rang nonstop. Lawyers conferred in urgent huddles. Meghan was reportedly furious. "We've been ambushed," she said. "She's doing this for attention." But behind closed doors, Harry was shaken. Not angry, shaken. Because he knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about one careless comment. This was about years of unresolved emotion, guilt, love, regret, and everything in between. He had hurt someone who had once protected him from the very world he was now attacking. And now that person was coming for the truth. Chelsy's attorneys didn't go to the tabloids. They went to court. A quiet filing, no grandstanding, no press conference. That's what made it more powerful. Her lawyer, Jonathan Ames QC, was known for his calm but devastating courtroom presence. He wasn't flashy. He didn't shout. He let the evidence do the talking. And what evidence he had. The lawsuit included not just Harry's recorded remark, but also a sequence of online posts and insider leaks that mirrored his words, all traced to the Sussex's media network. It also referenced the anonymous envelope Chelsy's team had received weeks earlier, filled with internal communications from a source close to Meghan's PR consultant. The envelope's contents suggested something horrifying, that the spy narrative had been strategically seeded to deflect scrutiny from within the Sussex camp itself. This wasn't rumor anymore. It was documentation. Harry's legal team had a problem. They couldn't disprove the recordings. They couldn't prove Chelsy was lying. Their only option was to discredit her emotionally, to portray her as bitter, vengeful, unstable. But that strategy backfired instantly. Because Chelsy Davy wasn't a scandal chaser. She was respected, educated, and successful, a woman who'd built her own empire long before Meghan Markle ever stepped foot in Buckingham Palace. The public saw right through the spin. Twitter exploded with support. "Good for Chelsy," one user wrote. "She stayed quiet for years while he trashed everyone else." Another said, "Maybe now someone will finally hold him accountable." Even royal reporters, usually cautious about taking sides, started hinting that Chelsy might actually win. Because the evidence was damning. Harry's exact words, the timing of the leaks, the coordinated social media patterns, they all lined up perfectly. The court filings even included metadata from online posts showing suspicious activity from accounts later linked to a California-based PR firm. And that firm, according to one insider, had previously handled special image management for Meghan Markle. The pattern was clear. It wasn't just defamation. It was orchestration. And when Meghan learned that her name might appear in court filings, she reportedly exploded. Sources described shouting behind closed doors, heated phone calls with advisors, and one particularly tense conversation where Meghan told a team member, "You fix this, or I will." But by then, it was too late. The British legal system had already accepted the case for review. The judge scheduled a preliminary hearing, and for the first time in years, the words Prince Harry and defendant appeared in the same legal sentence. For Chelsy, Though, the hardest part wasn't the legal fight, it was the emotional one. Every step of the process dragged her back into a past she'd carefully buried. The press began recycling old photos, reliving old love stories, replaying moments she'd long forgotten. And though she never said it publicly, friends claimed she wept after signing the papers. "It's not about hurting him," she told one. "It's about ending the lie." But as the legal wheels turned, something unexpected happened. One of Meghan and Harry's former aides, a quiet, soft-spoken man who'd left their staff months earlier, reached out to Chelsy's lawyers. He had information: emails, internal documents, notes from crisis meetings. And among those files was something extraordinary: a midnight email from Meghan herself, dated days before Harry's interview. Its subject line was only 2 words long: damage control. The message inside outlined how certain narratives needed to be pushed to reframe the conversation away from internal staff leaks. It mentioned sympathetic journalists, trusted outlets, and the need to remind audiences that betrayals often come from the past. It was subtle, but chillingly familiar. The phrasing mirrored Harry's later interview almost word for word. She was paid to spy on Meghan. The email didn't name Chelsy. It didn't have to. The intent was clear. This was no coincidence. It was coordination. Chelsy's team now had enough to not only win the defamation case, but to potentially expose a calculated media manipulation effort within the Sussex household. When this revelation reached Montecito, chaos erupted. Harry was said to be distraught, pacing, furious. "This will destroy us," he reportedly told Meghan. She, ever composed, allegedly replied, "Only if we let it." But the truth had already escaped. The midnight email was entered into the case files. The media found out, and the headlines turned savage. Meghan's damage control email leaked in Chelsy lawsuit. Proof Sussex's engineered spy rumor? Prince Harry faces legal meltdown over X. Within hours, lawyers on both sides began preparing for the next stage, the evidence hearing. Because the email, though damning, was only the beginning. The whistleblower had hinted there was more. Messages, recordings, voice notes, and one of them, he said, would end any doubt about who orchestrated it. A voice memo from Meghan herself, recorded, archived, and ready to be played in court. But who recorded it? And how did it survive? That's the question that would take this scandal from royal embarrassment to royal catastrophe. Because the truth waiting in that recording wouldn't just expose a lie. It would threaten everything Meghan and Harry had built. And when it surfaced, even the palace wouldn't be able to ignore it. There's a strange kind of silence that falls when evidence replaces speculation. It's heavy, electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm, when the sky holds its breath. That's exactly what hung over London's legal district when Chelsy Davy's lawyers opened the file that would shake the foundation of the Sussex empire. Inside that folder wasn't gossip. It wasn't rumor. It was proof. Emails, voice notes, digital timestamps, metadata, everything carefully organized, meticulously preserved, and impossible to deny. The file wasn't just a defense. It was a mirror, reflecting back years of manipulation, paranoia, and desperation to control a narrative that had spiraled far beyond Meghan and Harry's grasp. The first document in the file was simple, a printed transcript of Harry's infamous interview, the one where he said it. She was paid to spy on Meghan. Underneath, in black ink, were highlighted phrases from Meghan's damage control email. The resemblance was uncanny. Word for word, tone for tone, even punctuation. What had once sounded like a spontaneous outburst now looked like a script. The second piece was even more damning. A private WhatsApp exchange between 2 of Meghan's senior media advisors, dated 48 hours before the interview aired. The messages discussed floating the narrative about an ex-girlfriend being used by media contacts to feed Meghan-related leaks. One line stood out in particular. "If Harry hints at it directly, we can run cleanup on socials after." There it was, strategy disguised as spontaneity. Chelsy's lawyers didn't need to embellish it. The words spoke for themselves. And then came the voice memo, the one that would change everything. A 3-minute audio recording, stored on an old cloud drive belonging to one of Meghan's former assistants. The recording captured a late-night meeting, Meghan's voice, calm but sharp, discussing how someone from Harry's past could be used as context to explain ongoing leaks. It wasn't a confession in the legal sense, but in the court of public opinion, it was devastating. Because it showed intent. Meghan wasn't reacting to betrayal. She was orchestrating perception. When the voice memo was played privately for Chelsy and her lawyers, the room went still. No one spoke for nearly a minute after it ended. The weight of it wasn't just legal, it was human. Because beneath the PR strategies and damage control talk, you could hear something else in Meghan's tone: fear. She wasn't just trying to win the media, she was trying to survive it. In her mind, the world was closing in. The royal family had abandoned her. The tabloids despised her. Hollywood had begun to turn cold. And Harry, for all his devotion, couldn't shield her from the ghost of his past. That fear, mixed with pride and insecurity, had turned into a weapon. And Chelsy Davy had become its unintended casualty. When the evidence was presented to the court, the effect was seismic. Harry's lawyers scrambled to contain the damage. They claimed the recordings were selectively edited, that the emails were taken out of context. But the timestamps didn't lie. The file's metadata showed that all the communications happened before Harry's interview, proving that the spy narrative wasn't reactionary at all. It had been crafted in advance. The judge, a composed man with decades of experience, reportedly leaned back in his chair and sighed after reviewing the evidence. "This," he said quietly, "is not gossip. This is orchestration." News of the evidence leaked almost instantly. Within hours, social media lit up. #The evidence file trended across platforms. People dissected every line of the leaked transcript. Journalists analyzed Meghan's tone in the voice memo, every pause, every word. Some defended her. She was protecting herself, one tweet read. "They've been hunted for years." But others weren't so forgiving. "She turned an innocent woman into a scapegoat," another said. "That's not self-defense. That's cruelty." Public opinion began to fracture. For the first time, Meghan's once sympathetic base started to question her. Harry's silence, too, became deafening. He hadn't spoken publicly since the lawsuit began. Sources close to him described him as hollowed out, torn between protecting Meghan and acknowledging what she'd done. Because deep down, Harry knew. He knew the spy story hadn't come from him alone. He'd been fed those words, gently, subtly, through late-night conversations and emotional manipulation. He believed he was defending his wife. In reality, he was destroying an innocent woman's reputation. And now, that truth was staring him in the face. Chelsy's lawyers, meanwhile, had one final move. They filed a motion requesting the court to subpoena digital communication records from the Sussex's PR team, a bold, unprecedented step that would bring everything into the open. Emails, texts, audio, deleted drafts. Nothing would remain hidden. When Meghan's team got word of the motion, panic set in. Staffers began contacting their lawyers. Some quietly resigned. Others tried to distance themselves entirely. Inside Montecito, Meghan reportedly spent an entire night on the phone with her legal counsel. Harry, according to one insider, walked alone around the property, replaying old memories of Chelsy, her laugh, her honesty, the way she once told him. "The truth always catches up, even when it walks slow." That line haunted him now, because the truth wasn't walking anymore. It was sprinting. By the time the preliminary evidence hearing began, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, photographers, legal analysts, all waiting for the showdown. And in the middle of it all sat Chelsy, calm, composed, and devastatingly silent. She didn't need to speak. The evidence was speaking for her. When the judge ordered the first email to be read aloud, the courtroom went still. Line by line, the pieces fell into place. The midnight email, the WhatsApp messages, the metadata timestamps. It was undeniable. And when the audio recording played, you could hear the faintest gasp ripple through the room. Meghan's voice filled the air, deliberate, confident, strategic. Sometimes you have to direct the narrative before the narrative directs you. That single sentence sealed the perception of intent. By the time the clip ended, even the press gallery sat in stunned silence. Harry, sitting at the defense table, reportedly looked down the entire time. He didn't blink, didn't fidget. Just sat, motionless, like a man realizing the damage his own words had caused. When the judge adjourned for the day, Chelsy stood quietly, gathered her papers, and walked out. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't gloat. But as she stepped outside the courthouse, surrounded by flashes and shouted questions, she said one sentence that became headline history. "I never needed revenge. I just needed the truth." And that line, uttered in a calm, steady voice, cracked the world of royal PR in half. Because after that day, no one looked at Meghan and Harry the same way again. And yet, the most shocking revelation was still to come. Because buried deep in that evidence file, in a section even Chelsy's lawyers hadn't yet examined, was a forwarded message sent accidentally by a Sussex staffer. A message that contained Meghan's personal handwritten note, and the words written on it would ignite the next royal explosion. Because in that note, Meghan hadn't just referenced the spy. She'd written something far more chilling. Something about the diary. And when that diary surfaced, it wouldn't just destroy reputations. It would rewrite royal history. It was 2:17 a.m. in California when it was sent. One email, 19 words long, written in haste, but crafted with precision. And those 19 words would do more damage than 1,000 interviews ever could. Make sure the segment includes reference to the past betrayal. It strengthens Meghan's credibility. Timing, immediate. That was it. No greeting, no signature, no context. But the email address it came from left no doubt. Meghan Markle herself. The midnight email. In a case already brimming with scandal, this was the smoking gun, proof that the spy narrative had not been a misunderstanding, not a careless slip, but a calculated move. Chelsy Davy's lawyers couldn't believe it when they saw it. The email had been buried in the metadata of a larger thread between the Sussex PR team. It wasn't visible in the printed copies. It surfaced only when a forensic analyst traced the conversation chain. A single overlooked fragment of text that revealed everything. It was the kind of mistake that only happens when arrogance blinds caution. And the timing made it worse. The email had been sent just hours before Harry's interview, the one where he implied that an ex-girlfriend, paid to spy on Meghan, had betrayed them. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. When Chelsy's lawyers read it aloud in court, the entire room went silent. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the scratch of a journalist's pen, the slow, almost stunned exhale from the gallery. The judge looked up from his notes and asked one question. "Ms. Davy, are you certain this originated from Mrs. Markle's verified account?" Her lawyer, unflinching, replied, "Yes, Your Honor. We traced it through 2 authenticated domains connected to the Sussex Foundation's communications office." The judge nodded slowly, expression unreadable. And that was the moment the world changed. Because what had once been a defamation case between ex-lovers had just turned into something far bigger, a case about manipulation, power, and intent. When news of the midnight email broke, the reaction was volcanic. Headlines exploded across every major outlet. Meghan's late-night directive leaked in Chelsy case. Proof of Sussex coordination? The midnight email that shook the palace. Royal PR scandal deepens. Meghan's message traced to interview timeline. Montecito went into meltdown. Inside their mansion, aides scrambled to find explanations. Meghan, according to one insider, refused to admit the email meant what it appeared to mean. "It was taken out of context," she said, pacing the room. "It was about general narrative management, not her specifically. But it was too late for damage control. Because the phrasing, reference to the past betrayal, was too precise, too intentional. It directly matched the theme of Harry's interview segment, betrayal from his past. This wasn't damage control after the fact. This was the blueprint." Harry, meanwhile, was spiraling. He reportedly confronted Meghan after the court hearing. "You told me to mention it," he said, voice low, controlled, but trembling. "You said it would help people understand us." And Meghan, calm as ever, replied, "I said it would help the narrative. I never told you who to talk about." But Harry wasn't convinced anymore. For the first time, he began to realize that he might not have been the author of his own words. That his anger, his outrage, his public declarations might have been guided, not felt. He'd been a mouthpiece for a plan he didn't fully understand. And now, the plan had backfired. While the world debated Meghan's guilt, Chelsy's team quietly added another layer to their strategy. The email proved orchestration, yes, but they also noticed something else. Attached to that same email thread were several other drafts and notes, one marked diary segment. In it, there was a line that stopped them cold. "Use the diary, if necessary, It can validate the betrayal theme. No one knew what that meant at first. But to Chelsy, the word diary hit like a thunderclap. Because she had won. Her private diary, written during her years with Harry, had never been public, never even discussed. Only two people had ever known it existed, Chelsy herself and Harry. And now, somehow, Meghan was referencing it. How? Had Harry told her? Had someone found it? Or worse, had someone taken it? The implications were terrifying. If Meghan or her team had somehow obtained or referenced Chelsy's private writings, the case wasn't just defamation anymore. It bordered on violation of privacy, possibly even theft. Chelsy's lawyer immediately ordered a digital search. They combed through every document, every attachment, every metadata trail. And what they found next made everyone's blood run cold.